And I like it. You're not scripted. It's good stuff, man. So how long you been doing this now?
I've been podcasting going on my fifth year now.
Oh, I think we had a nice, good banter back and forth. Um, and it didn't have to always be about finance.
Because I'm open to having a discussion about anything that you would want to. Like you just were saying things about, this conversation wasn't the nuts and the bolts and the weeds, but I don't mind going there either, though.
If it went smoothly every day, life would be probably pretty boring.
Well, one thing I wished I would have said, and maybe I'll even get it right now and I'll be able to insert this earlier, but one thing I wished I'd have said was when you mentioned Bruce, I, I'm really appreciative to have gotten to know Bruce Weiner, from the Money Advantage, because that's how I got to meet you. And welcome to the Durham Talents channel. My name is Jesse Durham. For today's episode, I'm going to be having an interview with my buddy Tom. Tom and I know each other from a professional setting. We sit around a table regularly, talking shop, learning how to better help people. And he's been kind enough to come on to the show, give us his origin story with infinite banking. So we'll talk about the consumer side. We'll talk about the professional side, anywhere he wants to go in the conversation. I know I've got things I want to find out about Tom. He's an interesting fellow. I'm here to learn more, and I hope that you enjoy. All right, Tom, thanks for letting me get the intro out of the way. Thanks for our great conversation that we had the other day. So you're in that select few so far, right? That have been willing so soon in knowing me, meeting me, to say yes to hitting record on another conversation. So we've only spoken one other time directly on the phone, but we've been part of the same mastermind group in the infinite banking space for over half of a year now. I actually went back in my calendar. I was like, when did I first meet Tom? And it's been over half of a year already. And that's just crazy to me in a way. And I appreciate the value that you bring to that group, to that mastermind. So that's one thing that puts you on my radar, to want to have one-on-one conversations. And then you were generous enough that when we did have that one-on-one conversation, I was just walking around. I was at a public library parking lot actually, and I was just reflecting with you a moment ago about the cool things that we got to discuss. And I'll probably ask you a lot of the same questions because I know that folks benefit from hearing people's exposure to infinite banking, their aha moments, their questions, their doubts, their reservations, all of it, right? And then you're a professional in the space, so we can talk about that side of things as well. But we just had a great conversation the other day, and I didn't have, pen and paper where I could write notes and things like that. So if you would, Mr. Tom Suvansri, thanks for helping me with the last name. I'm just going to call
Sounds
him
great.
Tom. But I
Sounds
wanted to
great.
put your full, everything that you want to put out there. I want you to be able to put it out there, and don't, mention anything that you don't want to mention. I'm an open book. I've already told you. I want us to be able to have a conversation here, just like we did on the phone the other day. So thanks again, man, for being here.
Jesse, awesome, man. I've been looking forward to this, and I always love your energy and insights and perspective. And to your point, I love when we professionals and people who have been exposed to IBC or other things get to share with each other because it just builds, I think, a lot of certainly for me, my wisdom around it and an appreciation of how other people see it and experience it. And I think that's super valuable. So I've been looking forward to having this conversation.
Me too. Me too. Me too. Okay, so tell us, where are you from?
So I grew up in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, outside of Philadelphia. My parents came over from Thailand. One of those immigrant stories. He came over, and you think about some of the things that are scary today. I mean, the courage of these types of people to come over and do what they did and not know the language, and set up shop here, and he went to residency and became a doctor here. And so I had the fortune to grow up in this country. I was born here, and I some days have to remind myself how lucky that is. That's always a fortunate thing. But I grew up in a pretty normal suburb, upper middle class environment. Was pretty normal, right? Pretty diverse environment. But just like most families, you kind of live through life, and obviously being a child these days is very different than it was back then, back in the 80s and 90s. We had
Oh,
a lot
you mean back in the 1900s, Tom?
for freedom, You had the freedom to do anything you want. Now you can just track every kid everywhere they go. And so back then we had a lot of freedom, but just like it's a common thing that's still going on to today that, parents didn't talk about money, they didn't talk about a lot of things. And, unfortunately, it came through a lot of stories over the course of my life that's impacted me through that, that hopefully we can get in and talk a little bit more about today.
Now, if I remember correctly, your dad is a doctor.
Yeah, he was a doctor. He's deceased now, but he was a doctor for nearly 30 years in this country. Um, and great doctor, super generous guy, always he's the life of the party type of guy. And super generous and but didn't know much about business or money. So he was a great doctor. And you hear some of that today, and some of the clients we've come across, super bright individuals, driven, but we're never taught about money or understand it or focus on it, and unfortunately, you know, sometimes don't end well.
Right. I'll tell you what you put in my mind right there. Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad Poor Dad, was relating, and I can't remember if this is in one of his books or in a podcast or what, but he was having an interview with somebody from a big paper or a big channel or whatever, right? And this lady had an attitude when she was talking to Robert Kiyosaki. And when it came down to it, he just asked her, "What's the problem?" And if I'm remembering this correctly anyway, she said, "Well, I've done this and I have that, and these are my credentials, and I went here to school and all this other kind of stuff." And he held up a copy of his book and he said, "What does that say?" And she wasn't getting it at first or whatever. And he said, "No, look here, look what it says right here." He said, "Best seller." He said, "Yeah, I didn't do this, and I don't have these credentials, and I didn't go here, and Ivy, all this other stuff." He said, "But best selling." He learned about business, right? So I know that that's a problem. That that's a problem. That there are plenty of professionals out there, and maybe we'll get to this in a little bit when we talk about where you're at professionally and who you typically work with or enjoy working with, and because we've talked about that a little bit, but there are great doctors out there. There are great plumbers out there. Like, I don't care, blue collar, white collar, whatever.
Yeah,
There are great professionals in their field that are stupendous, but maybe they're so busy in the business that they don't detach enough to look at it from the outside as a business, instead of being elbow deep in the grease of the business to become a good business owner, right?
absolutely. Absolutely. And a couple of things to hit on that too. And I think you touched on, Jesse, something really important, that success is not defined one way, right? For anybody. It shouldn't be. And there's a lot of ways to be considered successful. And I do think that comes from inside, not which, growing up and now as you mature, I don't feel old, I feel mature, that, you kind of realize these things, like, these external pressures of what success looks like, how to become successful, or, how to become wealthy. There's one way, or the conventional wisdom. Well, that might be okay, but it is really for us individually to define what that means and how we want to show up in this world, and what is that, and how do we sort of keep that an internal sort of perspective in place versus, which is often the case, and I grew up that way, like everything was external, all the external sort of pressures on what you're supposed to do versus what you might want to do. And so those are, in my mind, when we talk about wealth, that is to me a really critical aspect that has helped me shape what wealth and abundance means. Forget about the dollar figure, but that's kind of a different area that, is something to me is so key to understand for ourselves, right? Because we're the ones who decide if we're successful or not somebody else.
Right, for sure. For myself, and you can say for you, but for myself, there's a guy that I enjoy listening to. His name's Rabbi Daniel Lappin, and he covers these 5 F's: family, friends, faith, finances, fitness. And for me, a filter like that or a lens like that really
Yeah,
works. I can remember
yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah.
it's alliterated. Okay, awesome. Yeah, that's the same for me. Those are important to me. Great, wonderful. It really is pretty simple when you get down to it. And yet you could spend as much time and work to be as successful as you want to be in all those areas, of course. And yeah, that is going to look different for other folks, but that's just a paradigm, I guess, that I
Yeah, I love it.
typically will resort to. I mean, who do, and he says it in a funny way. I feel like, he says, well, if you had the highest, current level that you could in your faith, if you had the highest current level that you could be at, in your family relationships, your fitness, your finances, all these other things, is it a bad life? No, it's good. So pursue those things. It's just a handful of things. It's very simple in a way. All right, so carry something a little further for me. You said a couple of things that I want to maybe connect some dots on. You said something right there about the things we're supposed to do, or maybe that we're told we're supposed to do, was one thing that you said that stuck out to me. And then the other thing that I think is connected, or I connected them in my mind, was your parents and mine either didn't do a lot of talking about money. So you and I, like you said, we're both blessed to be born in America. So, okay, tell me a bit more then about your background and how you grew up around money. What was the money message?
Yeah, as parents who are immigrants and, being in their mind the best parents they could be, and I think they did. They did their best. They, only knew what they knew. And, coming to America, their approach to parenting and obviously was kind of unique at that time. They tried to do everything for us to basically give up themselves in a lot of ways, right? They and shield us from any of the sort of challenges or issues going on in our family and their lives, right? They wanted to shield it. And they wanted to provide as much as possible for their kids, which, is honorable. However, sacrificing themselves and their futures was probably not what I would want for them, right, as children. And so that they shielded everything. You didn't have these conversations. So you never knew what was going on, right? Everything looked rosy on the outside, right? Until kind of as time wore on, some things you uncover as you get older, now you see where they're falling apart, right? A successful physician practice that was basically bleeding money and owing tons of taxes because they're being mismanaged, right? None of these things are apparent to us as kids because they're trying to protect us, right? And I understand why, right? They don't want us to deal with that. That's not a problem. Well, in this day and age, you want your family to know these things. You want to stay connected that way. We're in it together. But that's how it all happened. And only till like I got later in life that I learned the struggles they went through that I wish they never had to, right? I don't know if I could have done anything about it, but it certainly would give me a better perspective and maybe not be so needy as a kid, because I didn't know what was going on. And now it's really helped, shape the way I think as a parent is that, bringing your kids involved in these sort of conversations and realities of life is going to prepare them better, right? To understand how they see struggles and challenges and doing them together as a family unit, which we never really had, right? Is something that I've taken from that and tried to, influence my own family. So, it's one of those things you just learn and, their misfortunes, I feel very fortunate to have been exposed to it because it's helped me be a better person and father and husband in a lot of ways. I'm nowhere near perfect, but but I know they did their best. I know it. It just unfortunately wasn't they didn't know what they were doing.
I can I
So
can I can appreciate what you're saying. I'm also on the journey of bettering myself as a husband and a father, right? And it is a really neat balance to try and shield our children from things that they actually should be shielded from. And then also provide the grounds, provide the opportunities for them to figure some things out and work through some things. and just learn about some things. Us have a discussion, me actively share, hey, this is what's going on. Um, at the same time. So finding that balance. Okay, so real quick then, Lauren and I, we've got three kids, if you remember. We've got two boys and a girl, 11 years old, 9 years old, and 5 year old now. Paint the family picture for me real quick.
So right now, it's my wife Bridget and myself. I have two boys, 18 and 15. Right
That's
now.
right. So any of those nuggets that you have, since yours are a bit older than mine, send them my way, Tom. Send them my way.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. So it's with two boys and that are very different types of people. It was, trying to parent them, you always have to be flexible, right? Just like you think, like not every kid's the same, not every person's the same. So we had to sort of figure out how, and then we had to balance my life with my wife Bridget, who's very much in the controlling mechanism, and I'm on the other side, right? Of trying to let them be, let them grow and learn, and there's no right or wrong way with it. So there's a lot of balancing acts that we had to come uh, to agree to. So it was always, and it's been challenging because, you have kids and boys, I think in particular, are not very good communicators, especially when they're younger. And so it's a very frustrating sort of thing, certainly for my wife. For me, I think it was probably more normal in that way because I can relate better to that. As a kid, I remember wasn't really, I didn't really talk to my parents that way, and boys could easily kind of go on their side, but you know, finding the time to at least relate to them in their own worlds has helped a lot over the years, right? Just respect that they have their own spaces and their own worlds or friends and try to enter them and appreciate them more, right? Have more compassion for their worlds because it's very different. I mean, I have the benefit of 50 years of going through life. These guys are trying to figure out a crazy world of not knowing life without a mobile phone and access to so information and it's just a different world and the pressures to be a kid is difficult. So to me, I always take the vantage point of it's not what I want to do as a parent is trying to kind of live in their lives a little bit and appreciate it and be there as a guide as much as you can where they let you and allow them to you drive some of it, right? When they're ready to talk, talk. Don't tell them when to talk, type of thing. And that's come with time. That was what I would tell myself earlier in the game. I figured out a little bit more of that, but it's still a work in progress, just like anything else. But that's kind of where we are today. And find time individually with the kids. I find that that's been very helpful because they open up more when they're by themselves. Whereas at dinner time we're talking, sometimes they may not want to expose certain things or talk about things, but when we're by ourselves, they feel a little bit more vulnerable and okay, right? To talk. And then their true feelings and thoughts come out nugget by nugget. It takes a while. It's taken a while. Still happening.
That's that's actually where my mind was when you were talking about that was the facilitating of one-on-one time. That's I was envisioning that and thinking of a time just it was this week or last week, real recent. One of my boys, we'd been dealing with a conflict. Okay,
Mhm.
we he could have done better on something that was a task for him to do, and I needed to run some errands in town, and I picked him to go with me. And we get in the truck, and it's just me and him. So he asked, "Dad, why didn't you take brother?" Because he knew he didn't finish what it was he was
Mm,
supposed to have finished, right? So in his mind, he's thinking, why am I getting to go? Why am I getting to ride in the truck? Why am I getting to run into town? Because I didn't, do that thing like I was supposed to or whatever. And in my mind, that's why I picked him. I was like, because we obviously need to be spending some time together. We need to
mhm.
be talking more. And I wanted to give an opportunity for that to be able to happen. I wanted you to come with me, son. I wanted to spend time with you. I'll take brother next time, because I maybe I took him the time before or whatever too. So, I want to spend some time with you. And then the other thing you made me think of was last night we homeschool our children. So both my boys are sitting at the table and they're doing a tactical exercise. They're putting together some nuts and bolts. They're putting together a little machine. And what was it? One of my boys asked me a question about that. And before I could say anything, Tom, the other boy spoke up and he said, he's going to tell you uh, what did he say? He said he's not going to answer you, or he's not going to tell you the answer. And he was right. It's like I wouldn't just want to tell him the answer. It's like you
Yeah.
figure it out, spend some time, struggle with that thing, work through that thing, evaluate that thing, sit back for a second, and look at it with a different perspective. Don't just ask me for the answer right out of the gate. So I don't know. You're putting me in that mindset, and I
No,
love it.
it's great. And listen, and this is kind of, I think we think this way with our clients. Like we want them, like just like our kids, and we talk about, like, we want people to think about things, right? We're not here as certainly not as parents or advisors or whatever capacity. We're not here put on this earth to tell people what to do, right? Nobody likes that anyway. Everyone knows this, but we still sometimes do it, right? We sometimes can't help ourselves. But, you know, our job is to help people think, right? For themselves, really. That's how I look at it. And we're empowered. We have a lot of expertise and knowledge and, from all different places for wherever, however we experience it. And we're here to share it, right? It's not here to tell you you're supposed to do it, but help them, be more empowered to make their own decisions. And, as certainly as parents, that's what we want, right? Because I can't pay for you forever, right? That's not happening. Right? That's the deal, right? That's me being a parent. I signed on to be a father, but I did not sign on to financially support you for the rest of your life. That was not my job, right? So we have to empower them to make the better decisions so they can fend for themselves. Because just like you and I know, when we sell life insurance, we will leave this earth. We're going to graduate, right? I wish that wasn't the case, but that is. So, we get them ready and then they can go on their own way.
Yeah, I would say I had an applicable client conversation recently, a prospective client conversation recently, to where this was our second conversation. I feel like fella up in Maryland, and we had our second conversation. He was asking me further questions, and I like that time. I want to be able to answer questions directly. I want to spend one-on-one time with folks, and I do. But also, what I wanted to do was send him away with a resource. So there was a particular video
Mhm.
that I'd recorded that's on my channel that he asked about, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna leave this with you. And here's why. He actually helped me remember. He said, well, remember, Jesse, I've only been looking at this for 2 weeks. And I'm like, oh man, I'm so glad you just reminded me, because it's easy to go into the weeds, into the nuts and
Yeah.
the bolts, and maybe go too deep too soon. And you're right. Time needs to be given for thinking through this new paradigm of becoming your own banker or raising children or whatever it is that we happen to be talking about. So, yeah, giving time, letting people just really marinate on the stuff. And all right, one more story, and then I'm going to ask you a new question, because something you said earlier made me think about when your parents were shielding us from things. Perhaps I think my folks did the same thing, and we can understand why. We're parents now. We can understand that inherent nature. But I think we both are realizing and trying to verbalize to everybody else too the benefits of giving intentional opportunities for our children to be exposed to things and think through things and participate in things. Um, but there's a story in the Bible about King David killing a giant. You've probably heard of that one.
Yes.
But after that time, there were four other giants that are mentioned just a little bit later in that area of the Bible. Four other giants, and a lot of times not spent there talking about that. But what happened was is some kin and friends of King David from the Bible, the boy who killed Goliath, that giant, it was some of his cousins, some of his nephews, some of his friends that handled those other four giants. So I think that we as parents, we've got our giants in life to face. We should confront some things for our family, right? And but also at the same time, that should just be an example for them to go out and tackle their own giants, for them to go out and handle their own thing, because we can't shield them from everything, right? Just like we can't shield again, we could relate this right into the business. You can't shield your clients from the noise that's out there that says, buy term and invest the difference,
Yep.
or hey, if you want to do infinite banking, go get IULs, or just whatever it happens to be, right? They got to confront their own giants. Uh,
No,
all
I
right,
love that.
cool. All right, so tell me more about your background. Then you're born in America, family history. What did you end up doing professionally first?
Yeah, so I went in and thinking hey, I should just follow my father, right? He's a doctor. He's a nice career there, and I thought that was what I was supposed to do, right? This is going back to that kind of earlier stage, like, hey, just follow the path, right? The yellow brick road, right? That will take you to the promised land. And I didn't really enjoy it. I just did it. I was taking classes. I went to school for biology and chemistry. I was pretty good at it overall. I was not the smartest kid, but I can study like nobody's business. I was good at that, but I didn't really love it. It wasn't in my heart. I didn't have the passion for it. And, just like anything else, when you don't have it, the drive and motivation disappears. So I stayed in it for a little while, and then I knew I wasn't going to be a doctor. I didn't want to do it. And so I just meandered around into like different areas, like clinical. I went into clinical research for all, which is basically doing drug studies for on people, right? So this is me in the world of doing research, and it was just because it's a job, right? I need to get a job. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So just kind of experimenting. But, after a while in that field, I realized I needed a change. And somehow all those years of working in science, I decided to go back to business school because that's what everybody said you're supposed to do. Again, this sort of system driving you back to school, get more money, and I went for business. And I remember taking my first accounting class out of it, and I looked at it, and that was the first time I'd ever experienced accounting in my life. And I'm like 28. I was like, wow, this thing makes perfect sense. It's it's like connected. And from that moment on, like as I started learning more and getting into uh, business school, it really connected. Um, business, and I got a degree in finance and started working in finance for a while for a pharmaceutical company for a long period of time. 20 years later, still working there in a lot of different capacities. So I took a job for a long time, right? That was just it. I had followed the path, right? Get a good job, right? Go to school, get a good job, right? Pile in your 401k, right? All those sorts of things you're supposed to do. Marry, get a job, no debt, all those things. So that's kind of the road I was on until, which a lot of people face. I remember it. It was, 2008 hit. I was like, this stinks. Nobody told me about that they could go down like that. I didn't think that could happen. Advisor didn't know anything. He's like, ah, it just happens, right? No warning. And it just kind of got me on a journey, just like a lot of folks. This is probably not an uncommon story, right? They're like, this system doesn't seem right, right, to do it this way. I just don't, how could this happen? So I just started learning, right? I've read Rich Dad Poor Dad, expanding the mind. Didn't do anything with it for about 5 years, right? Because I was so consumed with the market, and that's what you're supposed to do. And I'm like, oh, it can't be that. Like that's just for somebody else. So that's kind of
How did you get turned on to Rich Dad Poor Dad?
I was, I just stumbled across it because I was just like, my advisors tell me all this about market and never talked about anything else. And I just was, looking around to say, what else are people doing? And then obviously, which a lot of people come across is like, hey, real estate's it. And then learning that it was obviously more than real estate, but about business and such. But I wasn't ready for it. This is what it is, like kind of your own sort of coming to it. Like I knew about all these things and it still took me a long time. So I just stayed in my job till I could figure it out. It just took me a while. And then I just finally got fed up and I just started getting into it. So I was in real estate and other things well before I learned anything about IBC. So it started expanding already. And then through the course of a lot of that, I stumbled across a book called Financial Planning Has Failed by Kim Butler, like in the middle of the night. Like I stumbled across it. I have this problem. Sometimes I find things I just read through the night. It's one of those weird things. And I'm reading this, I'm like, all the things I thought were right, she's saying they're the opposite. Right? Like the whole planning system has failed. And it just got me going. And it talked about life insurance. Life insurance is a great asset. Now, I had it, but nobody taught me anything about IBC, how to use it, that it's the tool that it had one purpose from what I understood, no other use of it. So then I said, what the heck is this? And then that's how when I stumbled across becoming your own banker back in 2015. And I'm like, I had to read that thing about 3 times in a row because I was like, what the heck did I just read? This is not it was just, I had to consume it again and again because I didn't get it. And then it finally started sinking in. But it was crazy. I still remember reading it the first time. And I just couldn't believe what I was reading. Just felt like full.
So you're working your career then,
Yeah.
and 2008 happens, big crash. You'd been doing a lot of the conventional things, if I'm hearing you right. So you saw those losses that bothered you, seems
Bothered the
like.
heck out of me.
Okay. That bothered you, maybe kind of woke you up a little bit. So you read other places, you talked with your advisor. He obviously, I mean, he said all the things that you would expect,
Yeah.
the things that you hear touted online everywhere that, well, hey, it's just a paper loss, or you've not experienced a loss because you haven't sold, or hey, keep riding the roller coaster because you
Yeah.
only get hurt if you jump off while it's
Yeah.
moving, and all this
Yeah.
other kind of
All that
stuff. Okay.
stuff. Yeah.
Okay, all that stuff. And when you mentioned what you did about real estate, is that still just education, or did you make a foray into real estate and started doing some things?
I did before I even learned. Yeah, I finally, it took me a few years and I started, that was a time when bigger pockets started getting popular and I started going to real estate meetups. So I was expanding my horizons around what finance was, right? Just while I was working. And I started investing in there, building networks in the real estate space. And it just sort of, by that expansive nature of constantly seeking, I stumbled across the whole world of IBC through that, right? As a secondary step. And then, just like anything, when you start knocking, I'm like, how many other doors are out there that I'm not even knocking on? That I don't even know they exist. And IBC was one of them. And so that came later, and I'm still working the job. And, as I started adopting it. My first, between Jesse, the first time when I started reading it, I'm like, I'm so upset with my advisor. I'm like, how did you not tell me about any of these things? So I had a bunch of cash value build up, like just sitting there doing nothing with not any inclination that I could ever use it for anything while living. Never thought
I'll
about it.
say, so you had some insurance with your advisor, not just qualified plans, but you had some privately
Yeah.
owned insurance as well, not
Yes.
just work or
Yeah.
term insurance or whatever.
Yeah. Just a base policy, right? No really mention of PUA, no mention of borrowing against it, no really sort of thought around it other than, hey, it's a savings vehicle. So I was upset at the time. It took me a little bit to get over it. And then, really after a while, as I'm reflecting, like, listen, not everything's perfect. At least it started, right? And it was more mature at that stage. I'd owned it for like 10 years by that point, base policy. And now it's like really solid. But, it took me a little bit to kind of just get over the sting. Like, and again, this is where I go back to the compassion. He didn't know any better, right? He was never taught that way. He didn't understand it. And even today, he sometimes contacts me and asks me about it because he's never learned about it. right? And so I kind of realized, hey, that's okay, right? I'm fortunate that I came across it now. Now I have to do something with it. So that's kind of the road I stumbled across, and I started using it and using it with real estate. That was kind of how we started connecting the dots together and then expanded into learning more about alternative investments, syndications, apartments, stuff like that. So that's the world that sort of developed through that, right? As I mentioned, the doors that were invisible to me years ago, now they've opened up, and now you can't unclose them or unsee them. They're there, right? And so it expanded from there. So through the course of that, it really I spent a lot more time learning about finance, and I knew at my job that after a while I knew I was expendable, just like anything else, these recessions and layoffs constantly, and somehow ended up being able to survive all of them by luck, right? And, I knew it was going to eventually end, right? And I knew I needed to get out and do something more meaningful, useful. And so in 2017 is when I said the stuff that I'd learned for myself and my family, could I share that with other people and help other people? And that's kind of where it all started while I was still working. And I did it on the side for a while to test it out. And it was hard to start. It was hard.
Okay, well, if you'll let me put a pin in that particular part, we'll go there. I don't care
Yeah.
where you go, but I am curious about. Okay, so you started, and if I just heard you right, you're just checking all the boxes. You're contributing to qualified plans.
Yep.
You're pursuing your career. You're trying to be a great professional. You get life insurance on yourself because that's something that everybody should do. You should have life insurance, but it just happened to be whole life insurance that you'd gotten from this advisor. So that's a policy that you still have today. Okay,
Absolutely.
so if my math is right, that thing's going on close to 20 years old or so, maybe a
Yep.
beat less. Okay, and you've used that policy, you've used policy. Okay, anything. All right, so I was making sure I was understanding that correctly because that's just cool. Um, yeah, anything else that you would share then as far as, the types of, I'm not trying to pin you to a dollar, but the types of premiums that you paid, maybe what you realized you wish you'd have done differently. Not that you can, right? But I'm just asking you
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
share your thoughts. Anything that
Yeah.
sticks out to you.
Yeah, at the time it felt like a lot, right? It was like, my first policy was $12,000, right? This is when I'm like in my 20s, right? I forgot what I was making at the time, but at that point it felt like a lot. Now it's like I wish I could put more into this thing, right? Because now it's like a machine. Like you put 12,000, it turns into like 28, right? And it's a good thing because I'm able to share kind of what long-term thinking looks like, right, around these things and to have that vision. And I have that direct experience with it by some of it, frankly, just by luck. I don't know why I chose to do it back then. It's been a while, right? But now where it is, it's so mature and has given me so much more access to financing for things. Like I can't even kind of put together how all the things I've used it for. It's been a lot. And that's why I love the word infinite. Like it's been used so many different ways in over the years. It's awesome. Like when I think about it. And so, now at the point, like I look forward to funding that thing like every year. And my wife's one was like 5,000. So like that 17,000 I just put in, it just turns into like, doubles. And it's only going better every year, but it's a long-term thing, right? And, as my kids get older, obviously the bigger piece is that this death benefit is now with us forever until we pass, right? And so it's one of those things and I look at it and it's like one of the best blessings I've had in my life. And those are the things I'm starting to share with my kids. And somehow, miraculously, I got policies on my kids when I first started. And I don't know why I did it. But it's created a little smaller foundation for them to get going. So
So you threw the numbers out there. I'm not asking, do you would would you say, do you want to say, I don't care if you do or don't, I'm asking though, since you put out the first numbers, you got policies on both your boys at the same time as well back then?
Much later, much
Okay,
later.
later. Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
later. Yeah, not when they were born.
Okay, when they were born. Okay. So, I mean, how cool. I mean, just in the conventional sense, because you can get a policy application started on a 2-week-old child. And I would encourage people, as soon as you wrap your mind around the beauty of having a guaranteed legacy, why not? Right. I mean, pick what number makes sense for you, right? People, if they're talking with me, they're going to pick their premium. Um, but then also when you can realize the banking function that type of a private asset provides for that child's whole lifetime, incredible. All right, let me make sure I'm hearing this right, because I don't know that you're not the person that I've heard who most closely makes me think of Nelson's story himself, because his story, right, is that he had a brother who sold life insurance, and Nelson bought a policy from his brother. And at that time that he bought that policy, he paid what was a significant amount of premium at that time. And here you are, if that policy is something like, 18, 20 years old, that's the early 2000s, which, if I'm looking at all this history that you just mentioned, that's before the crash of '08. So here's
Yes.
where I'm going. You got a whole life policy that you paid, $12,000. That's significant, I would say, for anybody. Actually, I would say that's more significant than most people that are just getting whole life insurance to have whole life insurance that know nothing about infinite banking.
Yeah.
And a 5,000 policy on your wife. You're paying significant premiums prior to 2008, but you also had qualified plans, if I heard you right. So you told us what happened in 2008 with the qualified plans. And I'm also, don't read anything into this, people, that I'm not saying. Don't read anything into this that I'm not saying. You do what you want to do. Tom and I already said,
This is
we're
not
not here to
financial
tell
advice.
people what to do. Um, but your investments and mine and everybody else's did what they did, right, in 2008. And here you have this whole life policy that the vast majority of the commentators would deride as a horrible place to put money. But now you're putting 12 in and getting multiples of 12 through those ups and downs of the market. And I mean, that's just incredible to me. And really, I don't know that I've ever talked with anybody yet, Tom, that's made me more think of Nelson and him telling his story about, everything around that. He paid significant premiums and it started producing, multiples of the premiums that he had ever paid into his policy. And he wished he could have gone back to his brother and shook him real good and hard and said, "Why didn't you tell me to pay more premium,
Oh my God.
than
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
did?"
And at the same time, as they start maturing, and a side note with this is that, again, back to my father he certainly cared about his family. And so got sold like a universal life policy back in the day. And as he was aging, and he was barred against it. However, his advisor and him and were very disciplined to manage it. And you could see where this story's going, Jesse. Like the debt was eating the whole thing up, and me and my siblings were trying to keep it alive for as long as we could for the sake of my mother, and we just couldn't do it anymore. The cost of that insurance just basically, just like we hear often, ate it alive. And we basically got to the point where we put in more than what the death benefit was, and we had to cut it loose, right? That's how it was so mismanaged. And the potential downside of these sorts of types, again, I'm not saying you don't do that in your audience, like for the right types of people, it can be useful. But this is why you need good advisors to be with you, to manage it with you and be responsible with it. Because when you're borrowing against these policies, like it's a loan and you have to be responsible and disciplined with it. Don't steal the peas, like Nelson says. Like you've got to be an honest banker with it. And, so that's why some people shouldn't do this, right? And I tell people all the time that, right? There's some people that are just not designed and suited for IBC. It's a
Yeah.
fact, right?
Well, you're right. And the human problems are always first and foremost, no matter what, right? No matter what. So the the analogy that comes to me is cars. Some cars, and I'm not a car guy per se, but I love driving. But some cars are going to be more loose than others, let's say, right? And some are going to sit better in the road, hug it better. Okay. Um, but a driver in both those can steer it into the trees. You know what I'm saying? So if
Yeah.
you don't address the human behaviors
Yeah.
first, what does it matter what kind of car you're in, right? But if you do address the human behaviors, right? Parkinson's law, the golden rule, all the things in Nelson's book, then the car certainly matters, right? And when you can have one that'll sit better in the road, let's say with guarantees, what if we could guarantee that it would sit better in the road? What if it were a legally binding contract that if in your 70s, 80s, 90s, 100 and beyond, that premium didn't go up, couldn't go up, couldn't go up if the insurance company wanted it to go up because you had a level guaranteed premium. What if it could be that kind of car, right? Isn't that better? Yes, I think so.
I love
Yeah,
that.
I don't mind talking about that. Nelson in the book, he's got a short chapter on universal life, and he talks about how he didn't own it, how he didn't use it, didn't write it. Everybody that's ever listened to me has heard me say it. I own whole life insurance, and so I don't mind putting that out there. And I own whole life insurance, and I've never written a universal life policy. That's personally where I'm at right now. I enjoy listening to conversations around the subject, but that's where I'm at. Okay, that's just so cool, Tom. And we didn't mention that the other day. And yeah, I don't know if anybody other than your story right now has made me think more closely of Nelson's story in getting whole life before he really realized how this infinite banking paradigm changes how you could own and use and structure life insurance. Okay, so all right, you're in your career, you get turned on to real estate, you get turned on to general financial things, and you mentioned some names. Awesome. You come across the book. I'd love to know more about, and I read Becoming Your Own Banker in 2015 as well. So
Mm.
I'd love to hear more about, because you read it multiple times. What do you remember about maybe what were some of your biggest hurdles? What was a what was something that maybe struck a light bulb off in you? I mean, you know what really triggered an awakening in you to say, "Oh, I want to do this. I understand enough about it. I want to do it."
What, it's probably a good, and that's why I don't know about you, but I often, because of my experience with real estate, that it was clear that there was a connection point, right, in terms of leverage and financing and debt and strategic use of debt. So there was a instant connection that way, and that's where it shocked me. I'm like, I never imagined this asset could do those things, right? I didn't know it had those capabilities. And so when I first, that's where I was connecting the dots for myself, right? Because, reading, Rich Dad Poor Dad and understanding real estate, the use of leverage is huge, right? If you do it smartly. And so that was my first connection point, and I was like, "Oh man, this is great. This is exactly suited for me." I just didn't believe it initially when I was reading it because I'd never heard it. I'd owned it for whatever number of years at that point, 12 years. 11, 12 years. So it was just that was a connection point to me, and it just like fired me up. Like I said, initially negatively, I'm like, where have you been all my life? To, you know, thank goodness I was able to uncover it, right? And again, it was that was I remember that point because I just got so excited. So what do I do with this thing? It's like a toy. Like, what do I do with it? And so I started realizing that, hey, there's probably more I could do with it and put more into it, uh, even and design them better. Right now we know, right? And I use this as a design differently for a different purpose, right? And then we always talked about too, like a base policy can be used for a good reason, for a given purpose. It's like, What's your problem? What you're trying to achieve? And what's the tool that's best suited? And I think this is where we can, get lost sometimes. It's that tool is used for everything. The hammer is it. Well, the reality in our world too, around advisors, like, no, that's why we have a lot of tools because they can be used differently for different purposes to better suit the individual. But for the purpose of financing life, right, things, investments, and storing cash, IBC is, to me, the best way, right, based on my lens. But for other purposes, they can be designed differently, right? Life insurance, as we're talking about. So it's just being open to that. But again, that's kind of when I was going through it, I was just so excited with this new shiny toy. So how do I maximize the use of it? And so I got licensed.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm for a second time. I'm going to put a pin in the licensing part. We're going to go there. But you made me think about another couple of things that I thought of earlier. I'd love to see if you don't mind answering. So your whole life policy that you had from the start, was it with a mutual company? You don't
Yes.
have to name the company. I'm
Gar-
just okay. Neat.
it's
It
Guardian
was even with a mutual. Have you received dividends from that company?
every single year.
How cool, man. How cool. Very neat. Very
Every
neat.
single year.
So I had some whole life insurance actually, before I read Becoming Your Own Banker, but I'd only had mine for just a couple of years. But I did. I proactively, intentionally went out to a company to get privately owned. I had, company insurance, but I wanted more.
Yeah.
I was trying to be a good proactive parent, right?
Yeah.
My wife and I had our first son. I'm like, oh, we need to get our own insurance. And I even got it with a mutual company, and I got whole life, but ours was much younger. So I'm mentioning that both so that you'll just know I'm just trying to contribute to our conversation, but also that's a really important thing to go over with your advisor, your agent is, I believe letting them have a full, accurate picture of what I call your
Yep.
financial footprint.
Yep.
And it's even necessary. It's necessary to know, okay, what insurance do you already have in place? What is that coverage? Because folks are going to decide to keep some of it. Folks are going to decide to get rid of some of it. Folks might decide to restructure some of it, like different things, right? Because every individual
Yep.
will have different needs. And so that's why I say that. Okay, neat. Okay, with a mutual company, it paid dividends. So here's what I want to know. Okay, when you're talking about your real estate experience, and some things started to click for you. Okay, I understand the concepts of collateral. I understand the concepts of leverage. I understand the concepts of assets over liabilities. Okay, so some of those attributes started to click for you when you're looking at becoming your own banker. Here's what I want to know then. Did you ever struggle with thinking that infinite banking or whole life insurance was an investment? Was that ever a hiccup for you or something you had to work through?
Frankly, I never really, it really wasn't. I guess, again, I did, when I first got into it, again, when I thought about, I was more about the protection anyway for me at the time when I first started. But as I kind of better understood it after obviously reading it multiple times and absorbing it, I never really connected it with investment because we knew it was like a pass through, like, moving money through another asset to another asset, right? So I never really struggled with it. And I mean, to me, it just made sense because, again, for the purpose of it at the time when I first got it, it really was centered on, hey, I want to just make sure I protect my family. That was priority one, right? That at the time. And at the time, Frank, it's weird because at the time I didn't even have kids. I just had my wife. And it was just so some of these things, I look at life these days and I almost think there were no accidents to these things. It was it was just I think there was luck, but I think there's something there that to get in that they kind of knew where I was going, right, with this. And so I was fortunate enough to do it, but I never really thought about it. as an investment because it was more about protecting family.
Okay, neat. Well,
Time.
I don't think anybody can go wrong if their starting point is thinking assurance, protection,
Yeah.
peace of mind, legacy. You can't go wrong if that's your first step. Beautiful. Okay. Well, so I asked that because I think that's where some people do land, right? As they're vetting the concept, they're exposed to the concept, they're trying to evaluate infinite banking or whole life insurance, which are two different things. Infinite banking is the process, whole life insurance is the product. They're trying to categorize things in their mind, right, with
Hmm.
things that they already know. And I got a message earlier this week. Okay. I've had one or two. I've had two conversations with a gentleman from California. Okay. And he messaged me last night saying, something along the lines of, "Hey, Jesse, great talking with you again the other day. I'm really excited about this. I want to know more about next steps in this investment." Now, here's the thing. Here's the thing, right? Is that could just be a slip of the tongue because we got to
Yeah.
put a word to it, right? But I also can't let that slide. That's a great opportunity for us in that next conversation that we'll have, for me to reiterate, and I already did. I sent him a video to check out ahead of our next phone call to help him remember some things because our two calls have been spaced out over a fair bit of time. I don't mind giving people time to think through the process, like we were talking about earlier. People need time to think. But a lot of people classify infinite banking and whole life insurance as an investment in their minds. And it has nothing to do, like Nelson says from the start of the book, it has nothing to do with
Yeah.
rates of return or investing or those. So neat. Okay, that wasn't a struggle for you. I know that it is for some folks. So that's why I thought to ask it.
Yeah, you're right though. It is. And to your point, it's probably just there some of it I do think there's just the way that the financial industry has shared a lot of these things and they position it that way, right? It's an either or type of situation, just like you described. You have to make a choice. So the dollar is going somewhere, and regardless if it's going to have a high risk or low risk, it's an investment. They don't think of it like, but they would never term it the same way if you put your money into the bank, which is interesting, right? They'd never say putting money into a bank account is an investment. Never, right? It's what we do, right? So it is quite amazing how, and I was like that. So I understand why people think of it this way, but it is requiring a little changing of learning around these things to kind of position them properly. We call investments things that have risk, right? That enter the game of risk, right? The chance of you might not get your money back, right? So when we're talking about saving money or storing money, that's with the opposite, that it's s- safe, right? Secure, right? Which is very different. And so when you try to do apples and oranges, well, it doesn't make sense. But we're trained that way,
For
unfortunately.
sure. For sure. Okay, so when you were exposed to infinite banking, then you already had some policies. I'm real curious then. Um, have you got any more policies since then? Did you did you use the current policies that you had for infinite banking before you went the professional route? Just kind of fill in that middle ground for me, if you would.
Yeah, over time, yeah, as I got my own license working, I gotten policies for myself, more policies, um, uh, over time. So, we sort of built it up and they were designed probably more aligned to kind of what you might see in the book, right? So more access to PUA, the additional cash infusions in there. So now within my wife and I mean, we have kids that have policies, but we have a combination of maybe 10 policies across our family, right? Half of them are kind of old school base only, and the other half are more, IBC probably designed, if you want to call it that. So it's kind of a good balance in that way. And so, that's why I kind of look at it purpose-wise. They serve slightly different purposes at the time of our lives, and now we have, I think, a good structured balance of them. that, you know, ones are much more mature and the other ones are younger, but you know, they're significantly more cash early, and now they're, becoming more mature. So it's a good balance right now, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a pertinent part of the ongoing relationship between the client and the professional that, yeah, as you build onto your system, a policy might be structured in a different way, and depending on the person's age and depending on
Yeah.
their need for capital and how long they're wanting to capitalize and lots of factors, right? It's a very different conversation to be talking with somebody who's, say, already 65 and they're just looking at a handful of years or less until retirement than when you're talking with somebody who's 35, who's right in the middle of. So yeah, yeah, absolutely, very cool, very cool. Now I would say though that again, if we went back to that whole, if universal is on one side of the spectrum and whole life insurance is on the other, I would personally pick an all base whole life policy every day of the week, twice on Sundays, over a universal life. So, and I'm not asking you to respond to that. You don't have to say something to that if you don't want to. You can, but I mean, your story is such a powerful story that you started out with base only policies, but with a mutual company that's been paying dividends. And you kept it for the long run. You kept it, and my goodness, here on out, it's just going to get better. It's just, and how many times that you've used it. So, all right, so there's a question. Is there anything that you would share that you've used your policy for?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So when I first started in real estate, that's where I was so stupid. I didn't know anything, right? I was just learning it, right? I was at the dumb stage. So I just go to meetups and talking to people, and like I'm thinking all these people know what they're talking about, and none of them did either. So, so I felt like, at least we're on the same page. Um, but I remember going to a meetup and I met the guy, and I'm like, we just crossed eyes, we just looked at each other, and I just started chat. I was almost left and started chatting, and he became a good partner for me for a long time. The real estate. He was a seasoned real estate investor. So I'm just sharing this story that, to sometimes connect with people who are ahead of you, right? Because, you might be able to find. So I found a way to help him. My way was to loan him money. And I borrowed money from my policies to loan to him for his real estate acquisitions. And what did that do? It allowed me to also enter his world and learn more about him and how he did it and how he was able to secure like 30, 40 properties, right, at the time after the crash. And so he I saw the need for him, and he helped me learn more about it, and he helped me secure through that because I was loaning money and just paying it back into my policies. I was borrowing, like, at the time interest rates were so low, and he was being paying me 12%, right? I was borrowing at the time, was crazy. It was like, 4 or 5%, something like that. And so, but it was more of a just to get in the rhythm of using it. And then I used the dollars that I had in there to actually secure my first rental property that I bought all cash. I was able to secure it like that. I got the money out, got the house, fixed it up, rented it. This is back in 2015. 6 months later, refied it out, did the whole birthing, and got my money back, paid it off, right? Ironically, this past December, I sold that house and exited it over years and made a lot of money from it, right? So it's going to show you that, just again, thinking about what that helped me do is incredible. Just that one example, right? And it goes to show you. So I had control and access to cash without anyone having to tell me I couldn't use it and for what, right? So I use that and I share that with my kids because I said that's what's possible. Does it always work out that way? Of course not. We go through where it maybe didn't work, but that one worked.
I love it. Okay, so again, you don't have to answer this, but you capitalized the policy, you had cash values that you could leverage, you made deals in real estate, collected rent and whatnot. now eventually made a sale. Did you have space in your policy system to be able to accommodate, okay, anything that you would share there?
Yeah, no, that's where it was perfect because then I have the money back. Fortunately, I had a lot of losses carrying over that are basically going to cancel out the gain. So I have no really tax bite from that. And I put that money back into the policy and now it's ready and armed and ready to go again. Right? I was able to get it out of my home, which is illiquid. Now I have access to take advantage of the next opportunity that comes. Right? And I always tell people that. I mean, they're always the saving money and have emergency, but I get more excited. I have money ready to go when the opportunity presents itself. And a lot of people don't do that because they've got everything stuck in a qualified plan or in their homes that it's illiquid. They don't even have an equity line of credit that they're actually stuck, right? They have a lot of illiquidity, like people who are very wealthy, some of them very wealthy, couldn't pull together money because everything is stuck, right? And the opportunities will just walk on by. And so I encourage people to always, even though it feels lazy, to have money there stuck in a policy. You might be the one of the few people who can actually take advantage of it when the opportunities come, and they don't come every day, right? You might be one of the few that can take advantage of it. And I've had many cases of that in my life where that's happened. And I live by that. That's why I always have a decent amount available because they come. I just don't know when.
I love that. I love celebrating the financial wins of life. And you're right. There are so many people that if they follow the conventional wisdom, and again, I'm not telling people to do one thing or another, but if you had so much money, I don't care what the number is, but if you had so much money in the government qualified plans, or if you had, the house completely paid for on paper, you could have a nice big number, but that doesn't mean you actually have access to capital. And if you do have access to capital and you're doing it the conventional way, that probably means penalties,
Mm-hmm.
fees,
Mm-hmm.
paperwork, providing collateral, if somebody gives you their permission, all this other
Yeah.
kind of stuff. Um, yeah, okay. Neat story, man. Beautiful story. Um, very cool. Very all right. So tell me this then, you got these policies, you're using these policies when you're turned on, and people have done that. Okay, people have done that for a long time, used cash value policies, right? And we would all probably have heard of, but I won't make assumptions, this could be somebody's first video, Disney launching Disneyland, Ray
Mm-hmm.
Kroc
Mm-hmm.
buying out the
Mm-hmm.
McDonald's brothers, Miss Christopher launching her business idea of the Pampered Chef, and all these different beautiful examples. I love it. Whole life insurance, having a cash value that you can leverage because it's personal property to do whatever you want. People have done that for a very long time. So here's my next question. So people have used whole life policy for things before, businesses, investments, purchases, etc. What, in your words, then, would you say separates the infinite banking concept into its own paradigm versus just owning a policy and using a policy?
Well, again, I think we go back to the word of leverage and we talk about business, right? Leverages can be done in a whole bunch of different ways, talent, other people, etc. But I do believe that, having the leverage associated with a policy like, the whole life policy and IBC process, that the amount of control and freedom that gives people, I don't think that I think that gets even understated in terms of the value of it, right? To be able to access it. And especially on times when, you know, we may be in world of economic sort of tightening and potential, we've been up so long, the world of finance can be fickle. They want everything before they can lend you money, right? And so I've grown to really appreciate the value of that, to be able to access and control and pay it back on when I want to pay it back. That control is hard to put a number on, really, the value of it. I think people don't, who maybe have not experienced it, may not have that strong connection to it, but I really have come to really appreciate even more because as I've gone through things and I've come across people where they are stuck, right? They have to liquidate assets to be able to access money, right? We have the power to not do that, and that's within our world. So to your point, rate of return, all those sorts of things that people get enamored over. Yeah, do they mean something? Sure. But they miss the bigger picture is that we have the ample resource and sort of vault, if you will, to go get it that we have the key for, right? That no one can tell us when not to open it. We have that control. And so for people who are listening and want that in their lives, in their financial lives, this is a tremendous process, right? For that. And if you're thinking long term, then obviously legacy and use of it for the family is another thing. And I know that, I know that's a thing that you talk a lot with your family and have family meetings and those sorts of things, which I'm driving towards, which I'd love to learn more about that from you, because that's the type of stuff that really gives me such drive to say this is a piece of the legacy that we're perpetuating for our families so that they're better off than us and doing better in the world than us, right? At least give them the opportunity. So I know that was a long-winded to get into, but to me, I, you know, the freedom that it just is inspiring, and you can get hung up on whole life and the structure of it and the mechanics, all those sorts of things. It really isn't even about that. It really isn't. That's inconsequential, really, in the end. To me, is that amount of freedom, everyone wants that. No one would deny that. Freedom to do what you want, use your capital when you want, right? It's a beautiful thing.
I'm with you. I'm with you. I agree. And I'd love to get into all of those things. And I am passionate about the legacy aspect and intergenerational, planning and implementation. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We can definitely go there. So tell me then in your journey, no, don't say anything about being long-winded. I love it. I love getting the details. Um, but at some point, you have these policies, you turn on the infinite banking, you decide this is a process that I'm going to adopt. Um, what was anything in between being a consumer, owning these policies, going to use these policies in this new way that you're knowing and learning more about, but also bringing it to other people where you're
Mm.
the professional that can help them. What happened there?
Yeah, there was a stage, I remember it back in, when I was learning more about it in 15, 16, and I just, again, I kind of alluded to it, the job was not fulfilling. I knew that had a shelf life. It just was going to be my choice, or maybe it might have been their choice, but it turned out to be my choice. But it took me a while because I'd only known that life and that job, right? And that's why I appreciate people and, they learn something a certain way. It's sometimes difficult to change. It is. It's really hard and scary and all those things we know. So it took me a while. So that's why when I started off doing it, man, I was horrible. Like, I didn't know what I was doing. And, I would just share it with friends, and you know how it is. Like, I get so excited, just like I get excited to talk to you, Jesse, about it. That's kind of how I was. I didn't know how to sell, right? I was in sell mode. I was just like, this is great for people. It's helping me. I'm gonna throw up all over you, and hopefully you clean yourself up and, buy something from me. So I didn't know what I was doing for the first year or so. And yeah, I helped some people out and such, but it showed me that, this is a different uh, type of role. And, a sales role, and try to get over the sort of stink around that, right? It took me a little bit of time. And I'm still learning and getting better at it, but it took me a few years to finally start getting comfortable with the concept of it, to be an advisor. But it's weird because even within my job, I was like an advisor to people. It's just I was getting paid a salary for it, right? As in a business, you're having to sell and influence people all the time. It's the same thing, right? You're helping them solve a problem and you explain it to them, right? How can it benefit you? So after I got over it, it got a little better, and thankfully I was able to get around other great people who have who are like-minded in this space. And in the mastermind we are like where in the world I met Bruce Wayner at the time, right? At different conferences and such. And it again opened up a world of this is a possibility. And I just have been growing and learning from that and recognizing that, all the noise around the financial space, it could be negative, but there's a lot of great people in there doing wonderful things. But you got to get exposed and see it and sort of figure it out, just like we were talking about, what's the right path for you to do it. So it's been an interesting journey with it. IBC is still a good chunk of what I do and help people with, but just like anything else, we evolve, we grow. And so I've got to other things of, learning about taxes, which is huge, and learning about, growing, businesses, like how to help businesses be supportive as a business as an advisor, right? And so those are all things that I think the foundation of Rich Dad Poor Dad and IBC has helped me sort of go down that path. So how can I help these business owners who are bringing so much value to this world leverage maybe IBC or these other strategies that help business owners succeed? That's kind of the direction I've gone, and I'm still
Right.
learning.
And I remember some of that from our conversation last time, of course, where you were painting the picture to me, because I was curious about, where you're at in the business and who you're helping. And also you got plans, expansion and I get it. I mean, accounting, you said from the start was
Yeah.
interesting to you. And of course, taxes is a big issue to address with entrepreneurs and business owners and such. And you've got a really interesting background that you can bring to bear. So I love it. Anything else that you'd like to describe there as far as what you're doing professionally, who you work with, how you go about it? I mean, you're welcome to put it out there.
Yeah, no, I just quickly, I think, I just like, there's as I've gotten older and I thought about, and learned more about myself, and I think what I am sort of driven to do, and if you want to call it purpose or why, I I look at myself internally and say I've got to break out of my own sort of way of thinking and system, if you will, to be more expansive so that I can do more for myself, my family, others. And so with that in mind, as I go exploring there, I recognize too that accountants are in that world. They're stuck. They've gone down a different path and now they are in a point where, people are looking for them to do more. Their clients want them to do more, but they're stuck in compliance world and they can't help their clients as broadly as they probably would want to. And so the direction I'm going with in my own practice is to help free them up from their own worlds so we can help more of their clients, right? Do more around certainly the business owner, right? Who isn't just trying to reduce taxes, but they're trying to grow their business, sell their business, right? Diversify their investments outside of just the stock market, whatever. Like they have ample sort of things that they need addressed, but they don't know who to go to. And unfortunately, our financial world is such, there's a lot of siloed nature of what's happening. So it's hard to bring it all together, right? There's no quarterback, right? For lack of a better term. And that's the direction I'm going is freeing up the CPA so they can give their best for their clients in partnership with me to help their clients succeed at a much higher level and provide them the help that they truly need. Because I have grown to realize and appreciate the small business, the business owner and what they're trying to create in this world. Like I don't think I ever really appreciated that when I was at a job. I didn't think about it too much, right? You're working a job, you clock in, clock out, you never really think about it. Rich Dad Poor Dad obviously taught more about that, but I see how hard it is. And the people who do it is just amazing. The things they can create, but they are also stressed with a lot of different challenges. And one being is how to manage their money, how to maximize it for the growth of their business. And so to me, these are the areas that inspire me because the more we can give them, if they're good people, again, money in the wrong hands is a bad thing, but money in the right hands, the world is a much better place, right? And I believe that. And so my part is to help them with that. Um, and that's where my sort of drive goes these days. So I'm just really excited about it all because I know there's so much opportunity and, if I can help better, these business owners and CPAs and such unlock the potential there. I mean, forget about IBC for a second, which is a portion of it. This world is, I'll do my part to help make this world a little better. That's the way I look at it.
I love it. Well, I really enjoyed just the holistic description that you gave when we were first talking about, where you were at in your business and what you were doing and what you were looking to do and add to what it was that you were already doing. And if we just took what Nelson says in the Becoming Your Own Banker book and realized that the average person is losing something around a third, of their money in interest alone. And there are these other things. There are taxes to account for. There is inflation to all these other things where you could be helpful and other people can be helpful to help people just keep more of their money. Yes, business owners make the world go round. And if they can keep more of their money, they're better positioned. And then we're all better off because those businesses, stay profitable and stay in business and provide their goods and their services, right? Um, Man, I love it. Okay, so we're talking about your business. Go ahead and say, where could people get in touch with you best?
Yeah, definitely. My website, perennialpride.com. A ton of resources there. I do have my own podcast called, you know, really cool name, Perennial Pride Podcast. I really didn't think too hard about it. I spent 2 seconds. Um, so talked about a lot of things there, and so I would encourage people to listen to that. There's some interesting people and guests and such there, and those would be the best spots to kind of reach out.
All right, real quick, what's the intention behind perennial pride? I mean, you spoke to me a little bit about the other day. You've got the lion icon, but tell me something about it.
Yeah, it's funny. It's so before that I was Premier Trust Advisors, which is basically if you Google, hey, what's a good name for a financial advisor? You want to be premier and you want to be trusted, whatever. So it wasn't very unique. And as I sort of started realizing, hey, this is my business. It should reflect who I am and where I come from and what is important to me. And so when I went through this, I sort of reflected on a few things. I realized there was a lot of lion themes in my history. Schools, sports teams I played for, things I follow. I used to love watching lions and in their domain. And it connected me in the world of one being a family and a pride, right? Of, and the strength and courage around that in protecting our own territory and working together to prosper, right, in that space. So that was always something that clung to me and certainly fit with kind of my philosophy on finances is to own our own space and protect the heck out of it and prosper as a unit type of thing. And obviously when we thought about, longevity and thinking long term and making a long-term impact, perennial, I said, this was perfect, right? It's going to last forever, for as long as I can. And my job is to do my part to help give it momentum for my family as they kind of push into future generations that it will always be here, hopefully. So that was the intent around it to showcase that for people who are looking for that who believe that too, right? That's important to them. And I'm not saying it has to be, it's just those are the people I want to be hanging around with because they're the people who, in my mind are doing good by this world and, I'll do my part to help them.
I love that. I remembered some of that from our phone call the other day, but I wanted to get you to say it out loud here for everybody again because I love it. Here's how I'd like to wrap up this talk, right? And I've already told you, I can't even remember if I already said it after we hit record or whatever, but now that we've got your origin story out there, I would love the opportunity for future conversations. We could do other projects in the future. I don't know if you've seen, we've got a round table as one of the series that I have on my channel. I've got a lot of different series, but that's a newer one. This is me inviting you. I'd love to have you on sometime.
Oh,
Hopefully we can connect our
anytime.
schedules. Okay. I know you've been real generous today, but if you'll let me wrap up this conversation with some rapid fire questions,
Oh man.
I'm gonna throw them at you if you're ready.
Uh, oh, jeez. Shoot.
All right. What's a nice easy softball first? Okay, cool. What's a recent favorite book or podcast of yours? Other than Perennial Pride, of course.
Of course, of course. Favorite book. Actually, I'm reading a book. It's called Daily Dad. I've been pretty big into Stoicism, the philosophy, learning more about that. There's a book by Ryan Holiday. It's basically, just little sort of stories to help inspire you how to, be a better father. And I started taking this to heart, and it's a reading. It's supposed to be read one day at a time. I don't do that. I read them like a month at a time. Like, I don't, and I read them again and again, but it's a daily journal. So simple tidbits of helping you, inspire to kind of be a better dad and how to adopt some of the Stoic philosophies in your parenting.
Cool, cool. I'm aware of who he is. Haven't read that book, so we'll have to talk some more about that. Neat. What is one of your favorite quotes or sayings?
Um, I'm always partial. I'm a big sports guy. Um, I still like the one, from Gretzky, you miss every shot that you never take. And, I really sometimes think about that on occasion when I get nervous about things. So just take it, take the shot. What's the worst could happen, right? And it's simple, easy, and I just, pushes like just do it. Don't be scared.
I love that. I love that. What's one of your go-to healthy habits?
Um, I do spend a lot of time in the morning and I do spend time in the morning, just short meditation type work in the morning, just to clear my head and, try to give some positive thoughts going through to get the day started. I started doing that, and as I started adopting more Buddhist philosophies around things, it's given me a calming nature. We live in a stress-filled life, right, world. So I use that to try to combat that.
Love it. Who was one of the most impactful people in your life and why?
Mm. Directly in my life. You know, I would have to say my father in the end of it, because when I think about the history and the things he did, and I think I underestimated the type of person he was as I was growing up. And I reflect on a lot of that. Even though he wasn't directly teaching me, he was showing it to me. He was showing the courage to do things that are scary. And when I reflect on those sorts of things, it does give me inspiration. So I often think about those things because, that's what we need to be doing, showing to our kids from my perspective.
That's good. That's good. Beach or mountains?
Beach.
All right. All right. That's normally a pretty quick one for everybody. Sunrise or sunset?
Oh, I'm a sunrise guy. I love it.
Best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Hmm. It's a good one. Like I don't, something that I've heard um, some people say, I don't know who it's from directly, but um, to never take yourself too serious, right? And I tend to do that because everything's important. But I've learned to not take everything so serious, and so it allows me to stay level-headed. Um, so yeah, I don't know who says that, but that's the thing that I've heard before.
I like it. We'll take it. Okay. Last one's fun one from my boys. My boys gave me this one. Would you rather be able to breathe underwater or fly?
Oh, definitely fly. Absolutely fly.
Okay.
'Cause I'm a diehard Philadelphia Eagles fan, so I want to fly, fly, fly.
I got it. I got it. Tom, this has been an absolute pleasure for me, man. I put my intentions out there. We could do more stuff. This has been a blast. I really appreciate you being, so generous with your time and blocking this off so we could make this happen. It's been in the works for a little while. I've greatly appreciated your contributions to the group, but now for the one-on-one time, man. Appreciate you.
Jesse, this was so much fun. I appreciate you having me on, and I look forward to future conversations and roundtables or whatever the heck happens. I'm looking forward to it.
Love it. Love it. Awesome. Well, that was an absolute pleasure for me to talk with my buddy Tom. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put those down in the comment section below. Tom's contact information will be below. If you'd like to speak with me to learn more about how to live and leave a lasting legacy, you can find me at durhamtalents.com. This has been a great pleasure for me. Hope you have a great day. Take care. Well, one thing I wished I would have said, and maybe I'll even get it right now and I'll be able to insert this earlier, but one thing I wished I'd have said was when you mentioned Bruce, I, I'm really appreciative to have gotten to know Bruce Weiner, from the Money Advantage, because that's how I got to meet you and some other
Mhm.
great people that I know now. So that's just a really cool thing. And you mentioned him by name. And I'm also just really thankful to be where I'm at, in that IBC mastermind and get to have met folks like you. And yeah, I definitely wanted to say that.
Good stuff, man. So how long you been doing this now? Like, did you start this like early last year, or when did?
No, I've been, I've been podcasting, going on my 5th year now.
Oh,
Um,
okay, yeah.
yeah, I started later 2020, so I'm working towards my 5th year now. But I didn't do near so many interviews because I had a lot of information that I wanted to get
Yeah,
structured and out there. And I like that. I like series. I've done a bunch of series. I've run a general episode, podcast from the start. But
yeah,
I've built out these other series along the way, and an interview series has been one, and that's just kind of evolved from where at first I thought that I would only have clients on,
yeah.
to be encouraging and give testimonials to other people. But it didn't take very long before I realized that, hey, I got a lot of great people in my life that are also professionals in this space, and I like talking to them anyway. Let's hit record.
Yeah. That's good. No, I love it. No, I overall like listen, you are very comfortable in your role there as the kind of MC or lead in like the interviewer. Like very easy, very um calm sort of presence with it. So it was very easy to have a conversation with you. And I like it, you're not scripted, right? Which was really good. I've been on a lot of podcasts where it's just like fire everything, like question after question. So it was really like an enjoyable conversation.
Well, I mean, I just talked to you like I would on the phone, and like I did on the phone. And because again, I'm the one that wanted to talk with you. So that's just the lens, I guess, that I operate from first. Is there are things that I wanted to know about you that I wanted to ask. So I'm going to ask them. I'm going to have the conversation. But yeah, if we can hit record and other people get to go along your life's journey with you and glean from your takeaways and hear your
Yeah.
thoughts and your questions and your experience and be inspired along the way while I am, that's great. We all benefit.
Your style is good for me. And again, N of me, N of one. You're laid back and you're authentic. Like again, this is what I think most people want anyway, right? Right? You're natural, like the way you talk and kind of act and things you're saying. Like you could tell, it's just who you are, right? And that's great. It's authentic, and so to me, it's. I think that's attractive, right? So for me, it was very comfortable, very easy to have, and except for some of the fire questions, whatever rapid questions. I've never been great at those things. Um,
I thought they were fun, man. I didn't
no,
always
no, they're
do that,
great.
but
No, I
I
love
got
that
it.
part. I love that part. I mean,
Good. Okay.
even all the IBC people come at it a little bit differently,
Hmm.
which is cool. And that's kind of what you're getting at. Like, we're not like robots here in IBC world, even though some people will put us that way. But we're all kind of different, right? And that's the
Yep.
cool part about it. This has been great. I really appreciate you. This was great. I enjoyed it, and definitely we're going to be sharing this to everybody and promoting you and others. Like this is great.
I enjoyed it too, man.